Hi everyone and welcome to the garden. It's a lovely March day here, starting to feel mild, the plants are coming out of the ground, birds are singing, Max has got the best vantage spot in the house, we haven't had a fallout, and today I wanted to look at something that's actually a response to a comment I had on one of my previous videos, my budget tropical gardening video, and that is, if you had £100 to spend on your garden to create a tropical garden for this year and beyond, how would you spend it? So I wanted to break that down today and look at what I would do to build a real tropical garden with impact, not just for this summer, but for years to come. So firstly, for me, my tropical garden is one of my passions. Obviously I've spent more than £100 on it, and truth be told, I don't spend a lot of money on fancy clothes, as you can probably tell, or having a fast car. So for me, it's something that I've built up over a number of years. But if you're new to tropical gardening and you want to build something this year without spending a huge amount of money, is it possible with £100? The answer is definitely yes. But if you're looking at spending that amount of money, my first bit of advice would be, don't just get one or two small to medium sized palms, purely because you can easily spend £40–50 in a palm, and it's not going to grow that quickly in the scheme of things. They won't look that impressive, and ultimately two plants in the middle of a grassed area, it doesn't have that impact that you're really looking for. But equally, I wouldn't just go out into a garden centre in early to mid-May, buy a load of bedding plants, put those in, because although your garden will look impressive for maybe 4 or 5 months, as soon as it comes to October, all those plants will die down for winter, you won't have that winter structural interest, and potentially there might be a long wait for some of those to come up again next year. So, for me personally, if I was approaching this, I would work a sense of balance into the money, and I'd probably spend about £60 on structural evergreen plants that you can maybe start off small now, but they will grow to be impressive plants over the next, say, 3 to 5 years. So let's look at those first. Not to completely contradict my first point, but my first purchase for the tropical garden would be a palm tree, and for that I would go for Trachycarpus fortunei. Now you can get them in this size, so around a 4 or 5 litre pot, for between £5 and £10 a plant. If you go to supermarkets, you often have a few outside. Some DIY stores have them, or you can even check out Facebook Marketplace and eBay for some bargains from private sellers. So personally, if you had a medium sized or large garden, I would go for a few of these and spend maybe £30 to £40 that way. If you've got a smaller garden, then you can start with a plant with maybe a foot of trunk, but tend to go for around £25 to £30 that size, and you'll have a more impressive plant quicker that way. But if you choose to get them this size, you're playing the long game. They maybe take a year or two to settle in, but from that point, they'll grow pretty rapidly for a palm tree, and they can maybe grow a foot of trunk a year. So in 5–6 years, you can have a plant that's maybe 5 or 6 foot tall. It'll look really impressive, and by itself, that'll cost more than your whole original budget. So that'll be my first pick. I'll go for 1 or 3 of those, purely because plants in threes always look good. There's a lot of natural balance to it, and it'll really help create that structure, some tall plants for the future, that'll make your garden so much more impressive than just a collection of small bedding plants. So out of the £60 that I would budget towards these evergreen structural plants, that's maybe £30 or so that I would spend on palm trees. And for the next £30, in all honesty, it depends on the conditions in your garden, whether it's south facing, north facing, or if it's dry soil, if it's really boggy soil. That really defines what planting is going to thrive without a lot of additional care. So if you've got a shady garden, I would be tempted to go for a few Fatsia japonica. Now you might see them before. Some people grow them as houseplants, but they're perfectly fine outside. They're really, really tough, and they'll be one of my top evergreen choices that doesn't require a lot of care. It can take the frost, it can take pretty much anything you chuck at it, and it'll still look great. Now, one thing I would say is they always look better when they're shade grown or they've got plenty of moisture. The leaves look darker. This one's a fairly recently bought plant, but the leaves look darker, whereas in the sun they can go a little bit of a yellowy colour, they look a bit sickly, and they're not quite as impressive. But you can get a plant this size for around £7 or £8 at DIY department stores. You can get them from garden centres for that price. They're really not an expensive plant, and they will grow pretty quickly. So they are a large shrub eventually. They've got these glossy green leaves. They'll get to a fairly decent size within maybe 5 years or so, and they really help create that exotic jungle vibe without spending a lot of money. So if you've got somewhere shady, I'd be very tempted to go for a few of these. One thing I would say is, if you've got a limited budget, spending it on a few of the same sorts of plants gives it more impact. Whereas if you bought 10 of individual plants, they sort of lose that real tropical appeal. So I would go for a few of these, maybe spend £20 on these. Now, plain green Fatsia japonica isn't the only option, and if you look behind me, you'll see that I've actually got a few Fatsia japonica spider's web, which is the same kind of plant, but with a nice white variegation to the leaves. It's sort of like the trendy monstera that you see inside, but a plant that's suitable for your garden, very tough and hardy. They might get a little bit of frost damage on the new shoots, but they soon bounce back and they'll grow very quickly. So if you've got a shady sort of courtyard or a north-facing back garden, they're another great choice, and that white really brings up and brightens the shadows. So either way, I would really include a Fatsia japonica. They're tough, they've got big leaves, and they're a great choice for bringing that exotic vibe to a garden. The next group of plants that I would look at would actually be bamboos, and if you've got a small garden that's maybe sheltered or a bit shady, I would especially look at fargesias. And if you want to go back and look at my video runners versus clumpers, I do examine the main differences between the different sorts of bamboo. But essentially, you've got big varieties like the Phyllostachys, which can potentially be invasive. They can send out runners which can pop up meters away from the main plant. But Fargesia, in comparison, are really well behaved. They will never run, the clump will steadily expand over time, and they will get to being quite a big plant, but they're never going to be uncontrollable, and they'll always grow in a fairly predictable manner. And my top variety that I would recommend would be Fargesia robusta Campbell, but there's loads of great Fargesias. They might not have the absolute cane size that you see on the larger bamboos, but they're really impressive in their own right. And Berindas as well. If you look at Berinda papyrifera, that one is really impressive with icy blue culms. However, you might have to spend a bit more money. So personally, if I was working to this budget, I would certainly include a bamboo. I don't think there's any other plant that sizes up in quite the same way, that will double in height every single year and produce a really impressive evergreen plant. I've got a few in my garden, like this one here, that I'm planting as small plants, but I know that given a few years, they'll soon become very impressive in their own right. And the best thing about them is, you can spend around £15, get a bamboo plant that's maybe in a 5 litre pot. You can get them from garden centres, or stocking all the sort of main Fargesia varieties now, or go to somewhere like Scottish Bamboo, where they sell a lot of great varieties in small sizes. Personally, I wouldn't be without bamboos. They're a fantastic plant for adding that real vertical interest. They look completely exotic, and they can really transform the vibe of a garden. So that'll be my next pick. So hopefully you can see, in my opinion at least, rather than spending that £60 on one medium-sized palm, you could get a few small Trachycarpus, you get a couple of Fatsia japonicas and a bamboo as well. And although they're investment plants, within a few years you'll have a real leafy jungle garden that looks so impressive. However, if you've got a sunnier garden, or you maybe want to have a bit more colour and a few more different leaf shapes, I'd be tempted to look at plants like these behind me. So I've got a cordyline and some phormiums. Now you can buy those in small sizes, and with cordylines especially, a variety I'd recommend are the purple ones. This one's obviously been in a pot for a couple of years, but you can get them in small sizes, so maybe a foot or so tall, for around £3 to £4. And at that price, they might be relatively common as plants, but if you put a few in your garden, it really emphasises that tropical impact, and they're going to grow up over time and again be really impressive plants. One thing I would say about cordylines for phormiums is that if you want a slightly more colourful or bright looking variety, such as the Torbay Dazzler cordyline behind me, you do have to pay a little bit more, and they can work out around £15 a plant instead of £5. So it's one of those decisions, but personally, if I was working to a limited budget, I would go with the plain green or the purple varieties. They're very, very fast growing, they're easy to look after, and also, when you come to these colourful varieties, they're a bit slower growing and they're not quite as hardy. So if you go for the plain green or purple varieties, they're tougher and you won't need to do anything to look after them. So that's £60 out of the £100 hypothetical budget spent on these tough structural plants. And the best thing is they'll continue to look better and better every year. You don't need to bring them in, you can leave them in the ground. They're really tough, really hardy, and probably the best thing is they'll continue to bring that colour, form and structure through the winter months. So you can have a garden that's really heavily weighted towards looking impressive in summer, but then it might be completely bare in winter. And for me, it's all about that balance. Still having a tropical vibe through the winter months, but then building that up in summer. So on that note, my next recommendation, I would probably spend £20 on a banana plant. And the two main varieties I look at will be Musa basjou or Ensete ventricosum morellii. So whilst these Fatsias, the cordylines, the Trachycarpus, they will have real impact in time, for me there's nothing like these banana plants for really transforming your garden and giving that huge tropical wow effect in very little time. For just £20 you get a lot of plant for such a small outlay. And if you look at the Musa basjou, well, to be fair, both of these plants, if you're looking at buying them this year, I would wait until late April, maybe early May, when they become more widely available and a lot of garden centres stock them, purely because they won't like frost, especially with the Ensete. It won't take any frost at all when it's small, and you're better off waiting until the risk of frost is completely past for your area before you harden them off and plant them outside. So for us here in North Lincolnshire, if you check out my video at when to plant out tropical plants, I looked at it in more detail, but it tends to be around early to mid-May, maybe the second week of May. When you've got these plants, we'll say the moves are bad due, you buy them around a foot tall, and by the end of that first year, if we have a good warm summer, by October you can have a plant that's 5 or 6 foot tall with massive great big green paddle shaped leaves, but look completely exotic. And with the Ensete, although they can only stay outside half the year, the growth they put on over the summer is just absolutely amazing, and again they can be touching 5 or 6 foot by the end of that first year. Come the second year, they'll look more impressive again. They take a while to get going, but by August, maybe mid-August, you'll have huge great big leaves that are maybe 6 foot long in themselves, bright red, yellow colours that just look amazing with the sun behind them. So they're both plants I would recommend with real impact for just £20. So you spent £60 of your budget on the Evergreen structural plants that will continue to look more and more impressive with every year. You then spent £20 on a banana plant or something similar to that, maybe a tetrapanax, a plant that will give that massive tropical vibe but a lot quicker. So that obviously leaves £20 left, and for me I would spend that on maybe plants that add a bit of my personality or different colours to the garden. So you could look at plants like Persicaria, which is more of a ground cover. It grows to maybe a couple of feet tall, but it's got the most amazing foliage to it. It's a tough plant, it'll grow in most conditions, and although the frost wipes it out, it grows back again really quickly. And although we're in March and less than a month after the cold weather we've had this winter, mine are already starting to grow in the garden. They might get wiped out again by the frost, but they'll come back again very, very quickly. So that's another recommendation. Potentially, you could have plants like coleus and focus on the summer months. So more traditional bedding style plants. You can get these a lot of the time in garden centres or bought online as plugs for around £2 a plant. So that £20, you get 10 small plants that would really tie your garden together. Personally, my favourite variety of coleus is actually China Rose. I just love the pink and purple. It just looks so tropical. And one tip I would say is buy a lot of one type. So if you have multiples of the same variety, it really ties your garden together and creates a cohesive impact that again you lose if you have lots of different plants dotted around the garden. To make your money go further and get a lot more plants to your garden, you could spend that £20 on seeds. So although it's mid-March, it's not too late to sow a lot of these plants, and in reality this next few weeks is the perfect time because they'll get growing well and they'll get to a perfect size, so you can plant them out come early May and they'll romp away in your garden. If you wanted to add a bit of colour, then maybe look at dahlias, but really the opportunities are endless and there isn't a strict list of tropical plants that you want to grow. For me, it's all about creating the certain vibe that you want, the look that you want, and really you can tie in any plants that you like into the whole tropical aesthetic. So you can look at maybe sweet peas, Verbena bonariensis. There's a lot of different plants that you wouldn't immediately assume are tropical, but if you combine them together, you can create a really impressive garden with lots of colour without spending a huge amount of money. Like I say, we're probably a bit late now for sowing cannas, but there's plenty of time for ricinus and the big bold tropical foliage. For just maybe £5 or £6, you can get a couple of packets of those and they'll get to 8 foot tall in one season, which is absolutely amazing. But honestly, what I would say is just explore the different seed catalogues, go online, see what's out there, and I'm sure you'll find lots of different varieties that you can plant now that grow very quickly and help create that real tropical, colourful paradise in your garden this summer. For more money saving tips and ideas on how to build a tropical looking garden without spending a huge amount of money, then please subscribe and check out my video Tropical Garden on a Budget. I put a lot more detail into that video about all the ways that I've saved money and how I'm going to fill this garden with plants without spending a lot more. So that's a great start, but today's video was more a case of building on that and showing how if I had a fixed budget, how I would approach the tropical garden if I was building it from scratch, the structural plants that I put in first, and how I build on that with more tropical summer plants for that massive summer display. Now, the best thing with the garden that I've described is that it would only look better with every year going forwards. But you could maybe spend another £10 to £20 every spring on different plants, different seeds to change that look every summer. The best thing with these bedding plants, with plants you grow from seed, is you can completely change it. So if something works well, you can grow more of them the next year. And equally, if a plant doesn't do too well where you are, or you maybe want to change your colour scheme up, it's completely possible. So before I finish today's video, I just wanted to show you quickly around our garden here and how I myself am growing a lot of the plants I've described from small sizes to hopefully create that tropical impact over coming years. Thanks for watching. Starting off then, there's some phormiums. These were actually from a larger plant that I divided, but if you buy smaller plants they'll look something similar to that. And over time they'll build up large impressive clumps, they'll start to fill out more and really look tropical. Let's move on. You've got the Fatzias, that's a small bamboo, and the larger Trachycarpus. So obviously the ones that you plant will be a good bit smaller than those, but they'll grow up in time to form large specimens like these. Really tough, they don't need a lot of special care, and they look really tropical. Heading on then, you'll see there, more phormiums. I've tried to use the same variety, Yellow Wave, throughout the garden to really sort of tie it all together. A couple of small cordylines. Those will hopefully develop to be two nice structural plants either side of this bamboo walkway, but I'm prepared to plant them small, mainly to save money, but also because they will develop into nice strong plants over a few years. More Fatzias in there. And again, smaller bamboo plants. I don't mind planting bamboo small because they size up so quickly. It really is a great way of saving money. Max getting up to his old tricks again, cleaning the garden for me. So in this area between all the weeds, you can see some medium-sized Trachycarpus. And when I said if you had a small garden, you could potentially look at getting one, this is probably what you get for around £30 these days. So it's a good bit bigger than the others, a few years ahead, and at this size they'll start to grow pretty quickly and soon get that vertical height. And just looking at the back of the garden, you'll see a lot of the plants I've talked about in this video. So you've got the small bamboos there, cordyline and the Trachycarpus palms. They're all plants that I've planted in small sizes, mainly down to money, but I know how well they grow from these sizes. And whilst they don't look impressive now, in 5 to 10 years time, the Trachycarpus will be trunking and pretty tall, the bamboos will have filled out and you won't be able to see the fence behind, and even the cordylines, they'll look really exotic with big trunks and there'll be lots of planting in front of them. It'll give a great backdrop to my other exotics. So hopefully it's shown you that this isn't just something I'm telling you, it's a way of gardening that I personally use. Plant small, save money and plan ahead for future years. So thanks again for watching and I'll see you all soon. Bye!